James at 16 will not be presented this evening, but will return next week at its regular time. Stay tuned now for a special 2-hour What Really Happened to the Class of 65.
Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners.
His paintings redefined comic book heroes. His vision inspired a generation. The Legend of Kingdom Come is the definitive documentary on Alex Ross, known as the Norman Rockwell of comics.
It almost looked like Renaissance paintings, except for superheroes.
He makes them look like Olympian gods.
We go behind the scenes of his definitive graphic novel, Kingdom Come, now on Blu-ray, packed with exclusive interviews and unseen artwork. Order today at legendofkingdomcome.com.
If you're here at Word Balloon, it's because you like comics, creators, conversation, pop culture subjects. Would you consider joining the League of Word Balloon Listeners? Patreon.com/wordballoon. For just $3 a month or more, you'll get exclusive access to the Word Balloon e-magazine, featuring transcriptions of some of my best conversations. When you subscribe, you'll also be part of the Word Balloon Book Club, where Brian Michael Bendis and I will pick a comic every month to review and discuss live with the League on this show. Join the League today, patreon.com/wordballoon. Thank you always for your support, League of Word Balloon listeners. Rick Parker, welcome to Word Balloon. It's a pleasure to meet you, and I'm excited for our conversation today.
It's great to be here with you, John.
Thanks for letting me know about your wonderful graphic novel, Drafted. Wow, because, I guess that's kind of the start of your origin story. You really take us back to your childhood, and you were drafted during the Vietnam era. That's scary stuff, man, especially, as someone that remembered watching the nightly news and the coverage as a small kid. But I think you might be one of my first Vietnam vets to speak to.
Well, I was just a teenager, and I never thought it would happen to me.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. Again, the graphic novel is great because you really explain, the crazy stuff that happened in Basic, and also just living near the base and all the various adventures you had. But then you had a really interesting job during the Vietnam War.
I think that the hardest part was being in charge of military funerals.
Ooh, wow, man!
Is that what you were thinking?
No, but I appreciate you saying that because, of course, we've been seeing, sadly, the bodies coming back from Iran.
Right.
And I remember when that was an issue back in the day of not, on the news, not showing that kind of footage.
Yeah. The Vietnam War veterans didn't get the kind of respect that they deserved from the population. I think there was a lot of anti-war sentiment, and the public generally seemed to hold that against the soldiers and not the people in the government administration, like Richard Nixon, for example.
I remember, unfortunately.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah, well,
I hope that history isn't about to repeat itself.
I so hear you, and time will tell, unfortunately. It's interesting though, because I don't want people to think it's all. Your book really, it has a lot of sad stuff in it, and it has a lot of funny stuff in it as well.
I think laughter is important. And when I was a kid growing up, I always, I wasn't good in sports, and I wasn't popular with the other kids, and I wasn't big and strong. But I had a couple of things going for me, though. I could make people laugh by saying funny things, and I could draw funny pictures. And I'd like to think that I've been able to hold on to those two attributes for over 70 years.
Well, the career reflects it, obviously, but I also love that when you were in Basic, guys are asking you to draw their girlfriends for them and stuff.
Yeah, well, I was afraid he was going to kick my ass, and growing up down south, I hadn't really been around that many black people. Things were very different in the 1950s when I was a kid, and suddenly, you're in there with everybody. uh, kids from the wrong side of the tracks. I mean, it was scary. And of course, I was easily intimidated. But
Well,
my drawing talent saved me.
but the job I was thinking of was you worked in missiles, right?
When I decided that my chances of survival would be better if I became an officer. So I decided to extend my tour of duty, um, 6 extra months, and go to officer candidate school. I went to the artillery and field artillery and missile school in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and there were 66 of us in our class, and 22 of them went directly to Vietnam, and 22 of them went to units that were going to deploy to Vietnam, and the other one-third went to other deployments. And a couple of people were held back to go to missile school, and I was one of those people, and I do not to this day understand why they kept me back, because I was terrible in math. And I thought that there would be a lot of logarithms and trigonometry and things like that, which there was, and I was really awful at it. And it's a good thing I wasn't really in charge of anything very important to do with the missiles. Generally speaking, what they had me do was just watch other people work, and if they were doing anything dangerous, I was supposed to step in and suggest that perhaps they should not be standing under something that weighed 2,000 pounds, and lower it down just a little bit more. But it was an experience, I will say that. And it was a good experience for me, because I felt much more confident in myself as a person after being through after getting out of the Army for 3 years. That was good for me, because I'd been a pretty shy child up until the time I got drafted.
Interesting. So give me the path from the Army to Marvel.
Sure. It's all going to be coming out in a graphic novel, hopefully in a couple of years. The name of the graphic novel will be The Artiste, because when I was before I moved to New York City to become an artiste, one of the people that I was working with in an auctioning company, I told him I was quitting. I wouldn't be there on Monday to lift up the machines for the people to bid on. So he said, "Oh, you're going to New York to be an artiste, huh?" And so after I got out of the Army, I went to college and majored in art, and I got my bachelor's degree in Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in drawing and painting from the University of Georgia, which was a great school. I thought, made some good friends there. I wasn't really into the social scene so much, or the drinking or the football, but I stayed in the studio and I got a lot of work done. And I couldn't, and the thing was, in those days, you're supposed to go to New York if you wanted to be an artist. So that I figured, okay, this is what I'm going to do. So after I'd been out of school for a couple of months, I went to visit a friend of mine who graduated in June, and I asked him what his plans were, and he said, "Well, I'm going to go to graduate school at University of Illinois or University of Oklahoma." And he said, "You know what? Why don't we go downstairs and talk about this?" There was a bar right downstairs from where he lived. So we went down there, and we happened to bump into a college professor that he knew. And I hadn't had this particular professor, but he knew him, and the guy recognized us, and he said, "Oh," my friend's name was Ted. He said, "Oh, Ted, you're still here? I think you graduated a couple of months ago. What are your plans?" And he said that he wanted to go to graduate school. And then the guy turned to me and he said, "What about you, Rick?" I said, "Well, I was thinking about going to Pratt Institute to because you have to get a master's degree." We were supposed to get master's degrees because we were told that we would not be able to make a living as an artist, that we would have to teach, and to teach you'd need a master's degree. Well, I wanted to prove them wrong. I wanted to go to New York and be a successful artist. I didn't want to be a teacher. I was just 24 years old. I certainly didn't feel like I should be teaching anybody anything, especially somebody that was 2 years younger than me. But anyway, so I told him I wanted to go to Pratt Institute, and this professor said, "I can get you into Pratt Institute." And I said, "You can?" And this Ted Lanham said, "Can you get me in too?" and Ted was dying to go to the school, and he was a friend of mine, so I thought, it would be cool. Both of us will go to Pratt Institute. I'll have a friend up there. But so he went upstairs to Ted's apartment and called up the dean of the school and said, "Okay, you guys are in."
Wow.
It really kind of hurt my feelings because I wanted to be admitted on the basis of my artwork, not on the basis of somebody knew me. But John, so many things in life, happen to people for reasons that aren't very consequential. But I went to Pratt. It was in Brooklyn, in a neighborhood that the first 6 months I was in Brooklyn. I was so scared of something happening to me that I ran everywhere I went when I had to leave the apartment for the first 6 months. I kid you not. It was quite a shock.
Yeah.
Quite a shock in those days. New York City was a different place. It's a very different place than it is today. But anyway, I'm probably boring the hell out of you.
No, this is all great, man. And I'll ask at Pratt, were there any comic book illustrators teaching there?
Well, I was a painting major, and
okay,
I was also majoring in lithography, because lithography is a very complicated technique, and if you want to be a teacher, you have to have somebody teach you, the techniques. And so I thought that's what I would do. But you have to take other classes, and one of the classes that I had to take was psychology, and there was a very attractive young woman in my psychology class. And one night, under the guise of chivalry, I asked her if I could escort her to the subway. I thought that I would be a real gentleman and do that. But really, what I wanted to do was get up the nerve to ask her to go out on a date with me. But I didn't have any money, and I couldn't afford to take anybody to dinner. So when we finally got to the subway, I got up the nerve to ask her out. And I said, "Would you like to go out with me tonight for a cup of coffee?" And she said, "I can't. I've got to go home and work." I said, "Well, what kind of work do you do at 10 o'clock at night?" And she said, "I'm a freelance letterer for Marvel Comics." Well, I had never heard of Marvel Comics, but I had to admit it sounded like a pretty cool job. Anyway, we started dating, and one day I was over at her apartment, and she was lettering Kid Colt Outlaw, I think, with artwork by Larry Lieber. And I looked over her shoulder, and I said, how much do you make doing that?" She had a really nice apartment in Chelsea in New York City, and with a fireplace and a skylight and everything. I thought she was living a dream. Anyway, she said, "I make about $300 a week doing this."
Wow.
And that was a lot of money in 1973.
Absolutely. Yeah, man.
I thought, well, hell, I could do that. But it looked easy to me. When I was in high school, I took notes. I printed my notes in all capital letters. So you might say I had a lot of practice before becoming a letterer for Marvel Comics. But one day I went over to her apartment after a number of months of dating. I went over to her apartment, and she said, "Ricky, sit down. I have something to tell you." And I said, "What's up?" And she said, "I'm getting married and moving to Tucson." Well, I mean, that was a bit of a shock. And she did introduce me to her fiance, and they look like a couple. They look like they belong together. And he was a doctor, and I thought that I'd already come to the conclusion that when it comes to doctors and artists, most women might think an artist, a doctor might be a more secure life for themselves, but she didn't know that I was going to be a famous artist one day.
Attaboy.
At least that's what my intention was. I don't know how famous I've become, but anyway, I became a cab driver after that, and I was driving up Madison Avenue in 1975 or 6. And I passed Marvel Comics. I saw Stan Lee come out of the building and get into his Rolls Royce, which was parked in front of 575. And I thought, oh, yeah, I remember that guy. I remember Marvel Comics. My girlfriend took me there a couple of years ago. And, oh, yeah, she's married and living in Tucson, Arizona. I'll bet you if I go up there, they'll give me a job. And it was a while before I went to Marvel. Are you liking this so far?
Absolutely.
I'm basically telling the story of what's in the book.
You'll forget. It's a preview, man. It's okay.
Anyway, so I hadn't read comics since I was a kid.
Okay.
I was a big fan of Uncle Scrooge comic books and EC comic books. I remember where I was the first time I held a Mad comic book in my hand, and it was 1954. I just come out of seeing the movie The Creature from the Black Lagoon. And I didn't realize that the artist that really had a big appeal to me was Will Elder and Harvey Kurtzman. And so when Mad Comic Book turned into a magazine in 1955 or so, I could not believe how great this thing was, because it was very anti-establishment. They made fun of, the 1950s in America was especially down south, I think was a pretty straight place. And, not too many people were challenged the status quo, but Mad Magazine really did. They made fun of everything. And I love that. It was a great magazine. I was a big fan of David Berg and Joe Orlando.
Sure.
And I read, all the comics for free. I don't have a trunk full of comic books that my mother threw away when I went off to college, because I didn't buy that many comic books, because I could read them for free around the corner at the soda shop, where you could pay 5 cents for a glass of ice cold Coca-Cola and sit down, put it down on a table, and then walk over and pick out something from this rack of magazines and comic books that was about 75 feet long, and it had everything on it. Argosy magazine, lots of men's magazines, nothing too, risque, but lots and lots of comic books. And I like the Donald Duck and Uncle Scrooge comic books very much. I like the classic comic books, and the Journey to the Center of the Earth, and
sure, the classic illustrated
to the to the moon, and all of that stuff. I remember one cover that was called Tale of Two Cities, and it had a painting on the cover. The artists in those days were really great, and this magazine had painted covers. Most of the other comic books didn't, but this showed a picture of a man standing at a scaffolding something, and it was during the French Revolution, and they were about to chop his head off. And I thought, oh my God, I mean, you could, and I thought, I didn't know anything about the real world. I was just a kid, 7 or 8 years old, reading these books. And I thought that was the way things really were in life, that all of these characters and people that I saw in the comic books, I thought that I was going to meet them one day, that they're out there somewhere. The comic strips I loved. One of my strips that I read was a strip called Henry, and the little boy who lived next door to me was named Henry, and he looked just like the character in the cartoon strip. And I thought,
I hope he wasn't bald like Henry.
That kid's pretty cool. He's got a cartoon strip based on him, and he's pretty cool about it. And it was a while before I figured out that, that these things are all made up. These stories are made up by somebody. It's a figment of somebody's imagination. But I have never been able to shake the to resist the urge to, when I meet people, especially new people, I immediately try to associate them with some comics character that I've known in the past. So you immediately reminded me of Jack Dempsey, and I know you're a fight fan. But he was a big guy,
Oh yeah, absolutely,
big,
man.
Strong guy. Good.
Made history in Chicago. Made history in Chicago at Soldier Field when he had the rematch with Gene Tunney. Absolutely.
Wouldn't you have liked to have been at that? Thank God they've got films of some of these things.
Absolutely, man. No,
it's amazing.
I honestly, man, being a broadcaster, I kind of wish I was around when radio was the top medium pre-television, because I would have had a ball doing radio drama and comedy and things like that.
Well, I'm glad you're not, because otherwise you might not be here talking to me.
Maybe not. I don't know, man. But no, that's fantastic, and that's wow. So the soda shop would let you, or could you sneak it, or the guy was cool about it?
No, I didn't. Other kids were doing it. I didn't think there was any problem. There were two guys that ran this shop, and I don't know what their deal was, but no one ever said anything to me like, "Hey, kid, this isn't in the library." Nothing like that. You could stay there for hours. They also had a jukebox.
Sure.
And it played all of the big hits of the 1950s, but it wasn't free. You had to put money in there.
Sure.
I think it was 5 cents to play 145 record. That's where I first heard Elvis Presley, and Little Richard, and I like I like the songs that were kind of funny, like Harry the Hairy Ape. There was a singer called Ray Stevens, and his songs were humorous. I think I've always been drawn to humor, and especially in art. And if people think that my book is funny, I think that's great. I take that as a great compliment. But they're out there, and they are available wherever books are sold if somebody wants to read it. It's all true, and it covers my life from when I was 19 to when I was 22, and it's a lot of funny things going on there. But I forgot all about that, and I started working 3 years ago on my next book, which I hope will be my masterpiece. My life was really about being an artist, and I think that to do a book about being an artist in New York in those days, there's so many funny stories that I told my family and friends, things that happened to me, that I thought, you know what? I started writing them down actually in 2013. I had a blog. I still have the blog. There's 150 stories about my life. And then after I run out of things to write about, I thought, well, hell, now I guess I'm going to have to draw. I have to draw some of these stories. I had always liked to draw, but I wasn't a superhero artist. I didn't really relate to big, strong characters that did heroic things. I was a skinny little kid that people beat on and chased around the schoolyard, knocked down, But I could make them laugh. That's how I kept them from beating me up, I guess. Anyway, you never know what. You know what? A couple of things, John, that I learned in that we all have what it takes to be successful at whatever it is that we want to do. Most people are afraid to try things that they want to do. But I'm here to tell you folks, don't be afraid. You've got what it takes. You can do it. You just have to get started, which is the hardest part of anything, is getting started. But then once you get started, you'll start to see that you can do this, and tasks take on a certain momentum, and it's so much fun. I mean, it took me 5 years to do Drafted, but it was such a trip. When we were drawing pictures of yourself as a young man, suddenly you feel like a young man again. I felt like I was 22 years old there. It takes you back in time where the people that you haven't thought of in years are suddenly right there in the room with you. My parents had both died. My grandmother passed away a long time ago. But when you're drawing pictures of them and telling stories that they're in, it's like they're there with you. It was an incredible experience. And at one point, I felt like somebody else is doing the work. I'm just sitting here. I can see my hand moving on the drawing table, but it's like somebody else was doing it. And I told a friend of mine about that. And she said, Rick, that was God working through you. So I guess maybe if that's true, then I could say God co-wrote my graphic novel. All the religious people out there.
There you go. God is my co-collaborator. Absolutely, man. Yeah. Fine novel.
But no, John, it's been a great life, and I'm 79, and while the rest of me is falling apart, it seems like I'm getting better at the creative part. So that's nice. It's nice when something's getting better when everything else is the wheels are coming off.
That's like, I forget the name of the classical cellist. I heard it quoted. He was in his 90s and he would get up every morning to practice. And I think it was 60 Minutes or whatever was interviewing him. And they're like, Maestro, my God, you're in your 90s. Do you really need to practice? And he's like, well, as I practice, I'm seeing improvement. And it's not, and that's great, man. And that's the difference from really, giving up. I think a lot of people, when they get old, it's because they gave up, and clearly you're not giving up.
Well, it's the only thing I was ever really good at, John. I mean, I think I wanted to be a stand-up comic when I was a kid, but I was too shy to be in front of an audience.
Who were your guys? Who were your influences?
I love Jerry Lewis. Jerry Lewis was my favorite one. Martin and Lewis. And one day when I was a cab driver in New York, I decided to stop and take a break. And I'm just sitting there on West 58th Street, and it was pretty deserted area. And I looked in the rearview mirror, and there was a man walking toward me, and I saw him, and I probably was looking at him because I didn't want to get mugged or something. But as he went by, I thought, God damn, that's Jerry Lewis.
Wow.
He was my childhood idol. Jerry Lewis walking down the street, 1976. So I got out of my cab, and he by this time he was about 50 feet away from me, and I had a big, strong voice because I was in the Army and I was a acting drill sergeant. I said, "Hey, Jerry," and it scared the shit out of him. And he turned around like in a fighter pose, and I said, "I think you're great." And then he shot me the thumbs up, but he still looked annoyed. And so that's my one and only Jerry Lewis story. But that one I decided isn't going to be in the book.
Fair enough.
But I drew it anyway. But anyway, no, it's really, this. I think that people who do this kind of work understand that it's extremely pleasurable. One thing that I've noticed about myself as an artist is my work has a lot to do with discovery. It's finding things. I like finding things. And if you have a lifetime of experience, all of these memories are still inside of your head. My theory is, and I'm not an expert on this, but I truly believe, John, that everything that we've ever seen, everything that we've ever heard is stored inside your brain. And most of those things you don't use, so they graduate the doors of it's like a hotel with a whole bunch of rooms and a whole bunch of floors. Some of those doors would open right after you had the experience, but if you wait a few years, you don't remember that you had that experience. You open the door, you look in there, oh yes, that was the time that the guy pushed me off the top of a building, and I lived, something like that. But all of these a lot of the memories from my early life started flowing back to me once I started writing about it. It's a great way, I think, to unlock some of the doors. So I'm the kind of person, I want to know what's in there. I've been blessed with a good imagination, and I like to use it. I like to see what I can come up with. My favorite part about being an artist is getting an idea. And probably the hardest thing about being an artist is trying to do a good job on the idea. And everybody seems to have I know I did. I had a big fear of failure. It wasn't like somebody was standing behind me telling me, oh, you're really good at this. Although people did tell me that I was a good artist. And my parents were very supportive, and kids in school were very supportive, and always having me draw stuff for them. So when the guy in the Army asked me to draw his girlfriend, that was no problem. I'd already, I'd drawn stuff. I was used to drawing for people all the time. But it's fun to discover who you are, who each one of us is a unique individual, and everybody's got greatness inside. It isn't just that some of these people that you see on television or are great. Everybody's got greatness inside, and a different kind of greatness. Our job, I think, as human beings is to figure out what makes us special. How are we different from other people? What have we got that we can develop, and what do we like to do? I mean, what could we spend our time doing? A lot of people don't have the luxury, I guess, of thinking of what they would like to do. Probably many people, thousands of people, millions of people from the time they're children are forced into doing all kinds of things just to survive. I was very fortunate. I came from a middle class background. My mother and father both worked, and I got a chance to pursue my interest in art. In fact, I was looking through some stuff the other day, and I came upon the contract that my father signed in 1963 when I was 16 for me to take the famous artist correspondence course. And that was the one where you draw a clown or something, and you send it in, and you think you're
it was on the matchbooks, right?
Exactly. I didn't
realize
that what I was doing is I was calling somebody to my house to try to sell us something, and so this young man appeared at the front door, and he's dressed in a business suit and everything. I thought, oh my God, what have I done? My parents they're not going to be happy with me. But to his credit, my father sat down in the living room and listened to everything the young man had to say. Then he took out his checkbook and wrote out a check for $500.
Wow.
So I could take the course. And that was a tremendous amount of money in 1963.
Wow.
And my father was a great guy, but he worked hard his whole life, but he was not known for spending. He was known for being pretty tight with a dollar, But fortunately for me, my parents both lived long enough to see me have some success as an artist, and and make back, his investment on me. And I'm still working on it every day and every night. And also, while I have your attention before my time runs out, if there's anybody listening to this that
Time's
likes,
not running out. I want to ask you about Marvel. Don't kid yourself.
okay, well,
We got
we're
more
gonna
to
get
talk
that.
about, man.
I want to let people know, especially aspiring artists, just keep drawing. You got to do 5,000 drawings before you're going to get some good results. But once that ball starts going through the hoop, it goes through the hoop on almost every shot that you take. So, tough it out.
There you
But
go.
what I want to say is that, in schools they give out clipboards, or sometimes you'll see a clipboard here. Get a big clipboard with some typing paper attached to it, and carry it with you when you sit down to watch the local news on television. And just try to draw something. Draw whatever you see, or something from your imagination, because you get better with every single good faith attempt that you make at something, at whatever it is. It's it's like riding a horse. You might fall off the first couple of times, but pretty soon you're jumping over hedges or whatever.
No,
But
it's
anyway,
I'm a big believer of Malcolm Gladwell, who says the same thing. He says 10,000 hours, and he always uses Michael Jordan as his example, that he had that for the love of the game clause in his contract, so he could play pickup games because he knew it would make him better the more he played.
and he also sensed that he had great talent in a particular area. So I want people to really think about who they are, what makes them special, and to be that person to the best of their ability, and not worry about failure, because failure is, you got to fail a few times. You got to pick yourself back up and keep going. That's the only way you can do it. You got to just never give up. And I really do believe that that's I believe that most of us give up too soon on what we want to do. But life is a great opportunity to accomplish something. And I waited until I was, like, when people stopped hiring me, when the phone stopped ringing, when nobody seemed to want to hire me to do what they wanted me to do and pay me for it, the phone wasn't ringing. I thought, okay, now I guess I'm going to have to do something myself. And it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. Sometimes getting fired from your job can be the best thing that ever happens to you, because they can't fire you from being you. And if you can make yourself into a valuable person, or an expert on any particular field, or more than one field, then you're going to be you'll have something going.
You're describing my chapter 2 of my life,
Well,
post broadcasting, when I got downsized 5 years ago. So no, I hear you, man, and I'm living what
I
you're
know.
saying.
I know. I knew a little bit about you, and I was saying that, and I was thinking, I want you to realize they can't fire you from being you. You're a
That's
great
right.
guy, and you
Oh,
can
thanks, man.
do anything you want to, and so can the other people too, and they better believe it. Anyway, you want to talk about Marvel?
Yeah, man, I want to know, because I mean, working in lettering and stuff.
Yeah.
Who did you report to? You worked. Did you work there on at 575? I mean, where'd you?
Yes. Yeah, I went up there. I went up there to be an artist. I went into a comic book store. I didn't know anything about comics. I said to the clerk, "Who's the best artist in comics?" And the guy said, "John Romita." I had never heard of John Romita. I hadn't read comics since the early '60s. I didn't even know who Spider-Man was. And so anyway, I said, "Do you have any comics by John?" And he said, "Sure." He looked at me like I was crazy, but he sold me an issue for $2. I bought an issue of Spider-Man number 66. And I thought, well, I don't know. I thumbed through the book, and I found a page that I liked. And I thought, well, I'll just copy this page, and that'll show them that I can draw comics. I've got the page right here if you want to see it. And I've never held this up before.
Oh, that'd be great. Please, that'd be wonderful. Wow, I'm excited.
I keep it around for good luck. So there's
Keep talking so people can see it when the camera goes back to you. There you go.
Can you see that all right?
Yeah, it's a little reflective, but we got the basics there.
Yeah, all right.
Certainly.
Anyway,
That's a great page, man.
well, I think it takes a certain amount of skill to copy somebody else's artwork. And these days we have light boxes, so it makes it a lot. If you wanted to copy somebody's work, you could probably light box it. And I think I know a lot of people in comics light box stuff all the time. You got Wally Wood's, is it 40, 39
20,
ways,
22 panels that always work.
42 panels that always work. That's really great. And but Wally Wood said something famously, that if you can copy it. If you can't copy it, trace it. If you can't trace it, Xerox it. But I think it's better not to use these things. They're kind of crutches in a way. It's better just to learn how to do it your way, and that's what I think people want to see, and that's what they want to hear. If you're a musician, they want to hear a great song that they've never heard anything like that before. Um, People do like listening to covers of songs that were written by other people, but there's nothing like singing your own song that you've written yourself. And if you want to do that, if that's something that's interesting to you, you can do it. You just have to work your ass off, to make it. You have to make it happen. I think another thing, John, I'm kind of preaching here. I know this is what this interview is supposed to be like, but I just want to say that to people: do not be too reliant upon other people to do things for you, especially things that you would like to do yourself. Don't wait to be asked. Do not wait for the phone to ring. Do not wait to be invited to do what you want to do. Give yourself permission just to go ahead and fucking do it.
Attaboy.
You can bleep that out if you want to.
No, you could swear. It's all right.
But Marvel was a great place to work. I started there in 77, in the beginning of the year, in March of 77. Then my first day on the job, a young man came by. He said, "So you're the new guy, right?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "What's your name?" I said, "Rick Parker." He said, "Any relation to Peter Parker?" I said, "Who's that?" And the guy looked at me like, buddy, you don't deserve to be working here. That's what he said. I haven't seen him in a long time. His name is Warren Storab. If anybody knows where Warren Storab is, tell him to get in contact with me. I'd love to see him again and tell him I've had a great career, and it just keeps getting better all the time. But it was so fun. Marie Severin was there. She was a big influence on me. She was able to do the superhero comics, but her work had a humorous element to it. And
yes, not Brand X. I don't know if again, that Marvel parody comic that was, kind of, well, it was pre-crazy.
Not Brand X.
Yeah, not Brand X.
And Marie herself told me when she looked at some of my work, because I used to do things and put them up on the bulletin board or tape it to people's doors and stuff. I was trying to get attention from the other people at Marvel, but I wasn't doing the superhero kind of stuff. But she looked at my work one time and she said, "You would have been great on Not Brand X." And, I didn't know what that, I'm a very literal person. And, I didn't think I wanted to work on anything called X. But I've seen copies of it, and yeah, she was right. I would have been good for that. People at Marvel used to tell me you should be working for Mad Magazine.
Right, I was going to ask.
I was happy working for Marvel. I'm thinking, editor in chief, don't you like having me work here at Marvel?
What about Crazy? Because weren't they making Crazy when you were there as well?
They were making Crazy, and it wasn't doing too well. And they brought in Larry Hama, who's an extraordinary creative person. If you ever get a chance, if you haven't interviewed Larry, you should definitely talk to him. He's alive and well. But
Indeed.
He took over Crazy. He took over Crazy, and he made it great. And he had Bob Camp was working there, and that's where I met Bob in '84. And, some other artists were coming and going, that were working on it. And Larry said when he first got the magazine, he says, I guess I'm going to have to get you to do something for Crazy. And I thought, yeah, but do not wait for somebody to get you something to do for Crazy. Go ahead and try to think of what you would like to do that he might be interested in publishing. So I didn't have anybody around it. I had no common sense, John. I had no good judgment. I didn't have anybody to show me the way, but I've learned the hard way, by failing and then keep trying. You'll get it.
So nothing. You didn't end up doing anything for Crazy?
I did some lettering. For Crazy, but I was never able to come up with
an idea.
Never able to come up with any concept that I thought I could give to Larry. There was an artist named Alan Kupperberg who did a character called Obnoxio the Clown. And I thought I could do something like Obnoxio the Clown. I thought it was really funny. And Obnoxio got quite he had quite made an impact, I think, for a while there. Also, when I first started at Marvel, I saw a treasury edition of Howard the Duck lying around on somebody's drawing table. And I thought, okay, I looked at that cover. I think I've got one around here somewhere. And I thought, wow, okay, that's humor stuff. I did not realize that Marvel was a superhero company. They weren't just looking to do different kinds of comics, although they did try different things. And there was an editor there, Mark Grunwald, who
Sure.
unfortunately passed away about 30 years ago at age 42. Great
Yeah.
guy, very talented. He loved comics. Working at Marvel was his dream come true. He was a prolific writer who did Captain America for 10 years. He could also draw. Mark drew this birthday card for me when I was 30 years old. I worked at
Oh,
Marvel.
wow.
Mark drew that of me, and
Hilarious.
very talented guy. And he liked to do stuff. And if you had an idea of something you wanted to do, all you had to do was say, "Hey, Mark, I've got this crazy idea." And he said, "Let's do it. Let's go for it." And I think that's how they got comics like Fish Police. I don't know if you ever saw Fish Police.
Sure I did.
There
Absolutely.
were some other wild and wacky things there.
Well, ultimately, though, you did kind of mad/crazy style stuff when you did slices for paper cuts. Is that a fair comparison?
Yeah, Jim Salicrup, who's the editor in chief at Paper Cuts, had been an editor at Marvel Comics of Spider-Man, and he seemed to be one of the people there that really got me. And I think that the reason he got me was because he and I had a lot of things in common. Like the guy has a really good sense of humor, and he's a cartoonist, unbelievably good. If you ever see him at a show, he does these lousy $20 sketches. They started off, they were lousy $5 sketches, but they weren't lousy. But then he's just got a really great mind, very, very funny guy, and he can draw and write. And so when he went to Paper Cuts, he liked me, so he called me up when it was 2007, and I think I was 60 years old, and he said, "Hey, Rick, how would you like to do we're bringing back Tales from the Crypt." And it hadn't been published in 50 years. And Tales from the Crypt was one of my favorite comic books when I was a kid.
Sure.
Remember, in the old days, you'd go for a haircut and there'd be a bunch of comic books on the table. While you were
Absolutely.
waiting for them to call you, you could read some comics. And usually a lot of times they'd been read so many times, the covers had fallen off of them. But
Yeah.
there was this one comic book where this old gray-haired guy with long gray hair, he looks a lot like me, said he was talking directly to the reader. "Come with me." And that guy was looking right at you. That
Absolutely.
was freaky. I mean, these things sound stupid now, but I remember it's like 1954 or something.
Sure, man.
But
I'm with you.
so I jumped at the chance to do the sequences that introduce the stories, the introductory sequences featuring the Crypt Keeper, the Vault Keeper, and the Old Witch. And I did that for a year and a half or so. And we got when censorship, there was this. I wasn't trying to remember the name of the woman's name. She ran for president. She's from out on the West Coast somewhere. Anyway, she started believing that they should start censoring books, and so Jim thought it would be fun to do a cover with her on it, and the Tales from the Crypt guys were like, threatening to take her away, and can't remember the person's name. That's what happens when you get old. Can't remember.
No, I'm trying to think of who that might have been. Not Carly Fiorina or
No, she ran for president. She was John McCain's running mate.
Sarah Palin.
Yes, Sarah Palin. And I wonder what when you do this, so I did a picture of Sarah Palin and the Tales from the Crypt guys are taking her away, and it wound up in Time magazine. So,
That's awesome, man.
It was great to see your work in Time magazine, even though, it's different from Time magazine doesn't have a cartoon strip. But, you wonder if people actually saw your work. I mean, I wonder if
look for that, man. I totally have to look for that now. That's fantastic.
Yeah. No, that was fun. But the Jim was great to work for. And we did parodies of famous children's books and movies. And the first one we did was a parody of the Harry Potter series. And it was written by Stefan Petruka, who is a very talented writer. He can do anything. And he writes novels and all kinds of science fiction stuff. But he's got a great sense of humor. So we did a parody of the Harry Potter series, and it sold really well. Except I made the mistake of saying that instead of some of the royalties on the book, I just take a straight page rate. So everybody else is still, everybody that's in that book is still getting money. And every now and then, years later, they call me up and say, thanks, Rick. We got another check in the mail from Harry Potter and the Harry Potty and the Deathly Boring. But before that, we did a parody of the Diary of a Wimpy Kid series, which, as you know, has sold 700 million books worldwide. And that's published by Abrams Comic Arts, or Abrams. Abrams is the company that published my book Drafted. So one of the things I was afraid is I was going to run into Jeff Kinney, who's the creator of that, because I did a parody of Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and ours was called Diary of a Stinky Dead Kid. And, Jim Salicrup thought that up. That was his idea. But, you know, it looked just like, the artwork looked just like it, but the writing was kind of, it was a spoof.
Sure.
And I found out something, John, and I found out that people who love Harry Potter or the Diary of a Wimpy Kid, they do not like you making fun of their books. In fact, whatever you do, if you write a book or draw a book, do not go on Amazon and read any of the reviews that people have left about your book. I mean, most of the people liked my book and got it, but some people really said some really horrible things. And, you know, I'm a sensitive individual, and people have to be nice to me. But no, it was great fun. I finally got to do a parody of The Walking Dead, which, another thing I could relate to. Because when I was a child, I would go to these graveyards and pass by graveyards and often wonder, what are those people that are buried down there? What do they look like? Maybe I shouldn't say this. I always wanted to dig somebody up just to see what they look like. But, I went to see all the horror movies in Savannah, Georgia, where I grew up. 1950s horror movies, science fiction movies, aliens, people coming down in flying saucers, all of that stuff. I thought it was real. I mean, I believed it. I'd leave the theater and I'd look around to see if the flying saucers were coming around. But, it was a lot of fun. And, but so anyway, I didn't give you a chance to ask too many questions.
No, I love the stories. You're doing good, man. So Salicrup, of course, was your editor when you were doing Spider-Man, and you were lettering Amazing Spider-Man. But that's only one of many books that you were doing back then.
Yeah.
But I am curious regarding the Salicrup era, because you were there really in those crazy 90s, the boom and bust of Marvel in the 90s.
Yeah.
So as an employee, what was that like?
Well, it was a great place to work. It was the first real job I ever had. I was 30 years old when I started there. I was older than most of the guys. I'm the age of Marv Wolfman, if you know who Marv Wolfman is.
Of course.
I'm the age of Bernie Wrightson, was born.
Sure.
And,
knew them both. No Marv, but knew Bernie as well. Absolutely.
Mike Kaluta is my.
Kaluta's a great guy.
Walter Simonson and I
Walt's
are
a great
just
guy.
a couple of days apart. But Walter's a great superhero artist, world famous and everything. But I think if I'd gotten into comics earlier, I might have been able to do some work for Creepy and Eerie magazine.
Loved them. Warren magazines. Jim Warren.
Speaking of Creepy and Eerie, when I started at Marvel, the editor-in-chief was a guy named Archie Goodwin, who had been the editor-in-chief at Creepy and Eerie. And Klaus mentioned Archie as being one of the people that he misses very much. And I can relate to that because I thought Archie was one of the most interesting and funny and most fun people that I have ever met in my life. You could not pass Archie in the hallway that he didn't say something, that was creative, original, and amusing. When I first started working in Marvel, I wasn't reading the comic books. I just looked at it as a job. And, the books that they were giving me to letter didn't make any I have to confess, this might make me look like a jerk, but I wasn't impressed with any of the stuff that they'd given me to letter. Sorry, I won't name any names, but they were probably better than I realized, But so one day, just for fun, Archie was in the Marvel bullpen and he was talking and everybody was really loving his stories and stuff. And so I think, I'm going home and I'm going to read some of his books. So I snuck some books out of Marvel, read them over the weekend, and came back on Monday morning. I couldn't wait to see Archie to tell him how great they were and how much I loved them. And I wasn't even a comics fan. And I said, why did you want to be an editor when you can write like that? And he laughed and he said, "Hey, Rick, I like to eat." That's what he said. I like to eat. And I guess, there is something to be said for having a steady job and a paycheck, that comes out every 2 years. And he was a great editor. All of the people who worked for Archie, he brought out the best in them. One time, and I got a chance to tell Al Williamson this story. One time I was passing by his office, and Al Williamson was leaving Archie's office, and Archie was just standing there in the doorway. And Archie was a huge Al Williamson fan, probably going back to Creepy. And so he said, "Rick, come in here. I want to show you something." So he opens this drawer and takes out this page, which is about the big as a circus poster, and it's some jungle scene with every kind of vine and plant and little salamanders and things crawling around, and a beautiful girl and a handsome guy. And I thought, man, Archie was impressed. I was impressed. One of the most impressive things I saw, and this is a comic story, one day I happened to be in the stat room for some reason or another, and Bernie Wrightson came in with some of these pages from his Frankenstein book that he did, and that blew my mind. Not to use a pun, I hadn't seen anything as magnificent as that. These drawings were about this big. Frankenstein would be like in a crate on the back of a wagon being drawn by a horse, and or picking flowers on the side of a hill with the wind blowing. I mean, and every single blade of grass was rendered, and some of the blades of grass were overlapping other blades of grass. How the hell do you do that? I looked at this stuff, and I'm an artist, and I couldn't figure out how he did it. But those pages are absolutely magnificent. Bernie Wrightson was certainly one of the great artists of the 20th, comic artists and illustrators of the 20th century.
My friend Tim Bradstreet.
I was a big fan of Will Elder and Harvey Kurtzman.
My man, as am I. And in fact, I told Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Connor with their interpretation of Harley Quinn. I'm like, you're doing Will Elder. This is little Annie Fanny disguised as Harley Quinn. Yeah. And he's like, shh.
Yeah, those guys are... Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda are old friends, known them from when they were kids. In fact, I lettered Jimmy Palmiotti's tryout pages when he first wanted to work at Marvel. He thought they would be better if they had professional lettering on there. And, I think I made him wait outside while I did it or something. He was just a teenager. But and Amanda's wonderful, and they've had such a great career. I'm so happy for him, and I love it when I see him. Jimmy's a real New Yorker. And, he's got a great personality, very funny guy, and very supportive. I mean, he's supporting a lot of artists. Are really just they're kind of promoting themselves, or they're out for themselves. Jimmy is he promotes other artists. He helps other artists. He buys other artists' work. He tells people about other artists that are good that he likes. I love the guy. But anyway, and Marvel was so much fun, John. You would have loved it. And you could just walk into the office in those days. People would take the elevator up from the street. They would get off the elevator. The receptionist wouldn't stop them. They'd walk down the hall, and you'd look up, and there'd be some stranger standing next to you that had a curiosity. They wanted to see what was going on there.
Crazy.
And that was fun. But we had a good time. We really did. Had a really good time. One day,
were you ever nervous? Were you ever nervous though? Like
no.
When things got, well, I'm saying when things got tough and they were facing bankruptcy and things, like because you were working on you were lettering the Clone Saga when it was happening, and everyone kind of feels like that story ran on too long, and Marvel just it had this fallow period in the mid '90s where things weren't clicking with the audience.
Well, what happened with me was that I tried. One of the reasons I think I didn't try to do more creative stuff when I was at Marvel is I needed the money. So I was lettering every day and every night. When most people would go home, at 5 o'clock, I'd still be there at 10 o'clock at night when they were emptying the waste baskets and turning the heat off. But I needed the money. But But when Beavis and Butthead came along and Marvel Comics got the deal to do that book, the editor of that book was a new guy that had been Jim Salicrup's assistant on the Spider-Man books, and he had told me once because he'd seen some of my goofy drawings. When I'd send the pages in the brown envelopes, I'd draw something funny on the cover of the envelope.
Sure.
And the guy said to me, one of these days, if I ever get to be an editor here, I'd like to work with you. A couple of years later, maybe he got the job as Beavis and Butthead editor, and he asked me to do the artwork for it. So I quit all of my other work. I gave up all my lettering assignments to other people, which was kind of probably a dumb thing to do, because Mark Grunwald had told me when I got Beavis and Butthead, this is probably going to only last a couple of years. Maybe you can get a couple of years out of this. And I thought, oh no. I'm going to make this thing. I'm going to do such a good job. They're going to want to run this thing forever. And the first 20 issues were in the top 100 books of those days. It did sell extremely well, especially in an age that was dominated by superheroes. But I'm very proud of the work that I did on Beavis and Butthead. And if anybody wants to know, there are 28 issues out there and 4 trade paperbacks, and it was translated into 13 different languages. Now,
Did you write and draw?
Well, to answer the question that you asked, only drew it. Everything you look at, I did. And after a few issues, I had my assistant start coloring the book. And the book was taken away from the writer, Mike Lackey, after 5 issues, because the writers at MTV wanted to write the books because they heard how much money we were making in royalties. But I will just say this: I drew all the stories, and the stories and the pictures tell a story. I mean, I drew the stories, but the pictures tell a story. And there were a lot of times when I want to make sure that if they give me a script, that I put down everything that's in the script. I want to tell the story that the writer wrote. But in the course of doing that, if you think of anything funny, or if you think of something that you can change that isn't going to disrupt the flow of the story or get the writer mad at you, or have anybody think that that you have somehow stolen their thunder or tried to outshine them. Nobody ever said anything like that to me, but I tried to do it, and I had possession of the book. I wasn't hurrying. I wasn't trying to hurry it up so I could get it to the inker. Marvel, a lot of books are done by a team, but I was penciling it and inking it and lettering it. So I had possession of the pages for a long time, and I worked day and night. I mean, I dedicated myself completely to that project, which is what, I think is what you have to do. I think you really do have to do that. No matter, and whatever it is that you've decided to do, work hard at it. Push down a little bit harder on the accelerator pedal, so that a little bit outside of your comfort zone. Most people don't go outside of their comfort zone. And I think that's a mistake, because I've amazed myself at some of the things that I've done. Not that they were so great. It was just that I did them.
I get it.
It was amazing. But Beavis, I never went up to the office. I was always working all the time. But one day I had to go up to the office for something, and I thought, man, who died up here? Everybody was walking around like it was somebody had died or something. And it was when the company, they were laying off people, and they were laying off people by droves, because apparently, although I haven't read Sean Howe's book, Sean Howe wrote a book about Marvel Comics, which I have not read. And thank you, by the way, for not mentioning me in that book, Sean. If you're listening. But apparently the person that bought that company, if anybody had gone to the library and done a little research, they could have seen what was going to happen to Marvel Comics, because this guy had done this to all of these other companies, and now the wolf was at our door. And I was told that they just were interested in buying the company, not because they wanted to publish comic books, but because they wanted to own the rights to the characters so that they could exploit them in the film industry, which is what they did. And of course, they made more money over the weekend on the Spider-Man movie than they might have taken in on all the Spider-Man books, that sold, that year. But
So forgive me real fast, Rick. Was that because are you talking about Ron Perlman or like Avi Arad?
Yeah, well, Ron Perlman.
Okay, I assume that. Okay,
yeah, Ron.
Because I know Avi was the guy that made those initial movie and TV deals in the late '90s, early 2000s.
Right. Well,
Ron,
as you know, John, as a production guy or a bullpen guy or some, one of the artists there, I didn't really have any contact with those people. But editors did. Jim Shooter probably did. Jim Salicrup, I'm sure, had dealings with him. I don't know anything about him, but I know one thing: he ruined the business, as far as I'm concerned.
I'm with you.
He wrecked. everybody was loving it. It was his ship, I guess, to take it. He owned it. But, you're working on a ship and you're having a great time, and somebody suddenly says, get off the ship. We don't need you anymore. And that was a bit much because I just finished, they canceled Beavis and Butthead comic book, and I never worked for Marvel ever again after that.
Wow.
But
Not even lettering. You walked away from it all.
no, not even lettering. And once again, I'd like to say that the lesson that I learned here is do not depend upon other people to call you on the telephone and offer you work. Come up with something great on your own and then show it to them. You know, Terry Stewart was the president of Marvel, and when Beavis and Butthead got ended, I got kind of desperate. I had two little kids. I didn't know what I was going to do, so I had done this big drawing of everybody that worked at Marvel Comics, and it was as big as a movie poster, and it was in color. I decided I'm going to give this to Terry Stewart on the pretext that maybe Terry Stewart will take pity on me and give me some kind of job or something. So I went up there, and Terry said, "Okay, Rick, I tell you what, down the hall, we've got a bunch of Beavis and Butthead comic books that have been given to us. Marvel got boxes of 50 comics of every issue." So Lee was leaving the company to go be the president of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and wherever that's located. So he gave me all of the Beavis and Butthead comic books. So if anybody wants to buy any Beavis and Butthead comic books, come to me. I got them all in the boxes, unopened.
Are you going to have? Are you going to bring any to Terrificon and
Yes, I
sell them on
am.
your table?
Bring them to Terrific, and every other show I get, I'll have some of those available. But anyway, so at the end, Terry said, "Rick, why don't you come up with 3 or 4 ideas, and we'll do one of them." And I thought, great. And I was married at that time to Lisa Truciani, who'd been the writer of Barbie comic. And I didn't think of myself as a writer, John. I didn't think of myself as a writer. But I've discovered that we all have hidden talents that we may not realize is there. John, it's like you've got money and that you think you know how much money you got in the bank, John. What if I told you had an extra $1 million in there? Folks, you're all a lot more together and talented than you think you are. So make good use of it. But anyway, so Lisa and I worked our asses off for about 3 weeks, and I came back with 4 good concepts for them. We had my favorite one was called Budget Funeral Home. And that was about this really this crazy family that was very crooked and that ran a funeral home. And I thought it was funny, and it was unusual. It was before 6 Feet Under. There'd been nothing like that on television. But anyway, he said, "Look, Rick, things have changed. It's not. We can't do that anymore." So we didn't get to do a Budget Funeral Home for him. But I made there's a ash can version of it out there in the world. If anybody has that, hold on to it. In fact, I'd like to have one. I don't even have one for myself. But comics is a lot of fun, and you have to find a way to make your own life interesting. Everybody's got to do that. It's not somebody else's job to make your life interesting. It's your job to make your life interesting.
You got it.
So I'm just trying to make my life interesting, keep my life interesting. It's nice to earn a living doing what you do, but if people stop buying my books for whatever reason, I'm going to keep making them because my life has not been about making money, except when I was lettering comic books, I think it was about making money. But I learned that money is not the only thing. It's nice to have money, but there's a lot more to life than good things in life than how much money you can make. You have to find work that you enjoy doing and then do it. Anyway, you know that because you're not a kid. I'm used to talking to young people. I like talking to young kids.
I think you're giving them words of encouragement.
I know they watch your show too.
Well, and I appreciate that, and no, they do, and they listen, and I think you're pointing them in the right direction, and you're saying don't give up. And again, you and I both are examples of that because I got downsized 5 years ago from radio, and I've been doing the podcast full time since then.
And I hope
audience is responding.
And I don't know if you need a list of great people to talk to, let me know. Okay, I know so many great people in comics. There's so many people that are funny and interesting and fun to talk to, and I'd be happy to tell them to be on your show.
Well, also, first of all, obviously, I'll see you at Terrificon, in August. But also, when do you think the artiste will be ready?
Well, that's a good question. I think I've got at least another year of working on
Okay.
it,
All right.
but it's all written, it's all laid out, and many of the pages are completely finished. But what I've been doing is going back through the book and fixing all of the things that don't look right. You know, when you're first doing this stuff, it just kind of, the pages just come pouring out of you, and you just want to finish it and move on to the next page. But then I come back later and redraw parts of the book. I said a year, but I think that it's best for people to put a little bit more pressure on themselves, because I've discovered that the amount of time that you have to complete a job, the longer it takes you to complete the job.
Yep,
So
you
I'm going
need
to try to
deadlines.
finish it. I'm going to try to finish it by my 80th birthday, which is at the end of August.
Okay.
And I think that'll be good. I work on it every day. And I took a break from working on this book to get ready for a show that I'm going to this weekend. That Lisa and I are going to this weekend, which is the great Northeast Comic Extravaganza.
Cool.
But when I'm not getting ready for a show or walking the dog or fixing something to eat, I'm working on my book all the time. I'm easily distracted though, so I have to be careful. You can't start looking at Facebook or anything like that.
Oh no.
Also, I have this drawing which I did for you.
You did. I know. I'm thrilled. I'm excited to get it. Mr. Anderson, everybody.
I want you to know I could sell this thing for hundreds of dollars.
I'm sure you can, and that's your very kind of.
I want you to have it. I want you.
That's very kind, man.
You're if you haven't sent me your address, you have to do that.
I will do that. No, absolutely.
Don't say it on the air, because you never know who's watching this thing.
No, yeah, we're not going to do that. But no, man, you'll be in good company. I have Gene Colan art on the wall, Mike Grell art on the wall, and my dear friend Gabriel Hardman, but more modern guy. But Tony DeZuniga, Jonah Hex.
Yeah, I think if I was doing what you would do, and maybe I've said this to you already, I would hope that everybody that I interviewed would at least give me a piece of their work. Oh. Imagine the collection that you're going to have in 10 years.
Yeah, but also, man, you know how it is, and truly, people have been very kind of gifted me things, but also, I mean, that's how you guys make your living. I wouldn't presume to.
I gave up on making a living about 10 years ago, maybe 20 years ago.
I hear you, man. I hear you.
But I don't do it for money. It's nice if you can make money from your work, but I got to do it for me. I have to do it for me.
I get it. No, Rick, this is great, man. This is a fantastic talk. I appreciate it, and we will point people to Drafted, which is available, and you can get it. You can order it, and also you can buy it online at Amazon as well.
Or you could read it in the library for free.
Oh, is it on like Hoopla and things like that?
They have it in a lot of the local libraries, I think.
I see. That would make sense, of course, because it really is this great, kind of memoir of your time in the service during the Vietnam era.
It's 16 and up. There, people die in there in unpleasant ways. Yeah. I lose my virginity on page 214.
But your face cleared up, so that's the other good news.
I wish.
No, anyway. That's great, man. And also, people should hunt down the Beavis and Butthead stuff, or come see you at conventions.
Those are really great. I still stand by those as really being funny, especially if you like that kind of humor,
Sure.
But it's been a real pleasure talking with you, and you're a lot of fun, and I had a much better time than I thought that I was going to have.
Oh, that's a good sign then. Yeah. That I did my job. That's great, man.
You did great. Listen, all the best to you, my friend.